Greetings, my Groveling Ghouls, and welcome back to another Levia deck tech, this time fully updated for the Tales of Aria meta, or at least what I've experienced of it. Disclaimer, this build is still experimental, but it is currently what I've been working on to achieve about an 80% win rate across 40 games so far in the Tales of Aria meta. I will say, Levia, I think, is poised to be really, really powerful this format. While she was good last format, in my opinion, and had a good matchup in Chain, that was still a matchup that was very left up to variance. They could high roll you, and you could just do nothing about that matchup. So it is nice to know that that's kind of out of the way. Levia, though, in this meta, is very much a mid-range deck that has a two-phase game plan. That works now better than before, even, because before in the aggro meta, sometimes you had no choice but to try to just hit a gas turn early to maintain some kind of tempo. But in this format, Levia gets to achieve her dream state game plan of being able to block, and then pick that exact turn where, with an arsenal card, with your Blood Rush in hand, you just push forward and really try to take the game. That kind of strategy works really well right now, especially against the new heroes, because of how much they don't like blocking to really pull off their big, powerful turns. So, with that said, please, guys, give this deck a go, because I do think Claws Levia is a lot of fun and is going to get you some good results. So to get into the build real quick, like I said, this is a Claws build. Mandible Claws just presents an insane amount of damage when coupled with Blood Rush Bellows, which is really what makes Levia so unique in this format, is that she has the most access to power cards in the game, I believe, because she has Blood Rush Bellows, Art of War, Dread Screamers, sometimes Pulping, to just string together these turns that can feel incredibly oppressive because she is tuned to have higher raw damage numbers than really anything else, because she lacks hit effects, so her numbers are just that much bigger. So that said, the Mandible Claws are the only weapons I run in this build. For a while I was testing Hexagore for some value matchups, but we'll leave my thoughts on that for a subsequent video. As for the equipment here, I'm running the trusty Scabskin leathers in every matchup. Scabskins are something I don't like to roll that often, especially in this newer, slower meta, but I am going to roll it on things like turn 1, just to try to thin more cards from my hand to swing Claws maybe twice. I am going to swing it mid-game when I get passed back and have a basically a 4-card hand is really ideal for Scabskins. Because with 4 cards, you normally have 2 cards to pitch, 2 cards to play, and if you're lacking Go Again in that hand, then Scabskins is just how you get that other action point. That said, I don't like to roll them, but when I do, I have Gambler's Gloves to protect me from a 1 when I roll it in mid-game. If you roll a 1 early game, don't worry about it, do not pop Gamblers, just Arsenal and go ahead with your turn. But Gambler's Gloves is going to save you mid-game from just rolling a 1 that would otherwise set you super far behind, because you would take blood debt damage as well without being able to do anything in that turn. For the chest pieces, I do have a couple options here. I'm running Tunic and Carrion Husk. I run Tunic for the really slow, grindy matchups. I think Tunic is really optimal in this build if you run the pummels in the sideboard, which we'll get to in a bit. But being able to pitch a blue to play a 2-cost, have 1 floating and 1 counter on Tunic, means you can spend that to pummel the attack, which is really strong, really disruptive. And of course, if you can pummel a CNC, then decks like, let's see, OTK Bolton, or maybe like a setup Viscerai or something, they absolutely hate that. So Tunic is in there for those longer grindy matchups. However, I try to always take Carrion Husk. Carrion Husk is really good against all 3 of the new heroes, Briar, Lexi, and Oldhim. The ability to just, at no cost to you, just block out some big attack that they've worked hard for, is not only a great way to just deny all the resources they spent in that turn, but can also be a way for you to kind of decide, all right, this is the pivot turn, I'm using Husk now, that means I'm keeping more cards in hand to hit the gas and go, go, go. So you can control when you use that, and Carrion Husk is normally that marker for when you all of a sudden switch to the more aggressive game plan. As for the headpieces, you may notice something odd here. First, I just want to go over Nullrune Hood. Very simple. This is going to be in the deck for against Viscerai and Briar. In those early turns where you tend to block out, pitch to the Arcane, this is just your Arcane Barrier piece. So nothing really more to say there. Now this card, though, is the biggest discovery I've had in really pushing this deck's limits in the Tales of Aria meta. So I was running Arknight Skullcap for a long time, and I think in the aggro meta of Monarch, that was the right call. 3 extra health was a big deal in those tight matchups like aggro Katsu and Chain. But in this meta, what really is going to kill you is missing a turn in these long games. At first, I was trying Ebb and Fold for this purpose, thinking that if I drew no ways to turn off Blood Debt, or maybe like an all-red hand that didn't let me attack very well, Ebb and Fold was the way I would be able to save myself from a bad turn by just, banishing a card, cycling, turning off Blood Debt, and that would be it. However, Ebb and Fold was underperforming a ton, namely because banishing the card doesn't really gain you anything. It only turns off Blood Debt. You're not like a Chain deck where you could banish the seeds, draw a card, and play the seeds immediately. So Ebb and Fold felt a little too low value in the deck, and also costing 1 resource was really bad on those all-red hands, which is one of the reasons I wanted Ebb and Fold in the deck. So with that, I started testing Hope Merchant's Hood, and have absolutely loved this card in Levia. I very much think it fits her theme of never being able to kind of miss a turn. Once you hit the brakes, or once you hit the gas, it's all gas. Hope Merchant's Hood is exactly that kind of card. When you start pushing damage, when you start just with this overwhelming onslaught of attacks against your opponent, something like drawing an all-red hand or drawing no way to turn off Blood Debt is going to lose the game for the most part. It's going to lose you your tempo, you're going to take a lot of damage, and you're just not going to present that much as well. So Hope Merchant's Hood gives you that reset button to try again on a bad hand. It's very similar to Gambler's Gloves in the idea that Gambler's Gloves is there to protect you from rolling a 1. Hope Merchant's Hood is to protect you from drawing all reds, or drawing no way to turn off Blood Debt. It's felt really good in this metagame, on top of the fact that it is an instant that costs nothing to use, so you can fill up the graveyard immediately if you were short 1 to start banishing. The other beauty of this card, actually 2 more scenarios where it's quite good, is namely if you went for a big Blood Rush turn and then drew only reds off the Blood Rush, but this is your big push turn, Hope Merchants can let you retry, put those 2 reds back in the deck and try to draw something else. And then lastly, with all the disruption in this meta, like if you get Terra Sundered or Crippling Crushed by Bravo or something, and you have cards in hand that are just way too good to play the game without, for example, Doomsday or Blood Rush Bellows or something, you can Hope Merchant's Hood to try to save those cards, put them back in your deck so that they're not gone, because Levia lacks reliable recursion effects to get things back from graveyard. So that's why this card's been amazing. It's really not a meme, guys. I know it looks funny here, and it definitely doesn't fit the theme of Levia, but I suggest you try it. And that first time that you shuffle in an all-red hand and then draw just the nuts, you'll thank me. This card has been quite good. So with that, that's the equipment, and we'll jump into what the deck itself looks like. Alrighty. So Levia, when deck building her, I think starts to fall into these different package categories, where there are certain cards that do a certain thing for your deck that if it's something you want to commit towards in deck building, you have to run a full suite of to get good enough value. So with that, Levia's got kind of 4 core packages to what she can do, and it makes her pretty versatile, because not only can she do something like go tall, she can also go wide, she can also be very patient, she can also be very explosive, and also have infinite value. So she can do a lot of things. The one drawback, of course, is that she's a Blood Debt deck. So while you can go after all these game plans, you're always on a clock to actually end the game. I do find that to be one of the most rewarding parts of Levia as well, is to kind of find your line, play towards that outcome, and then when you finally do crush your opponent and achieve victory, you'll feel pretty good about yourself, because the deck is not that straightforward. So the first package I do want to show you here is what makes Levia just that insane. So these cards are actually not Blood Debt centric. We've got 3 Pulping, we've got 3 Blood Rush Bellow, and 3 Beast Within. So this is kind of like your core discard package that lets you go really explosive. Blood Rush Bellows is obviously the big card here, because what this does is let you discard a card, which is going to help fill the graveyard, draw 2, and enable your Mandible Claws to swing for 5 with Go Again. That +2 on all brute attacks can get even more nutty, because Levia has access to some other cards with Go Again that we'll get to in a second. But namely, this is the card that really enables you to have a massive pivot turn, swing so hard into your opponent, or even play patient with this card, keep it in arsenal, and do chip damage until your opponent kind of thinks they have a lay of how the game is being played, block 2, play 2, whatever. Then you come with the Blood Rush Bellows and just completely implode their game plan. So Blood Rush is really, really good. In fact, most of my games with Levia, I'm playing very patiently until I find my first Blood Rush Bellow. I want to set it up in Arsenal, make sure that it's going to be the biggest turn possible, and then go off. So this is really integral to how your deck is going to win most games. It's also an amazing card to find early because it helps you fill your graveyard. The other part of that discard package is Beast Within. Not only is it a 6 power, so it synergizes quite a bit, but it's also a way to turn off Blood Debt with your discard effects. If you discard this with Blood Rush Bellows, then the Beast Within trigger is going to banish cards off the top. Until you hit a 6, it goes to hand. So that does turn off Blood Debt, which can be really cool on your Blood Rush turns if you didn't have a very powerful banish 3 card to end your Blood Rush turn with. This is just going to help you turn off Blood Debt so you don't have to worry about that part of the game plan. So these 6 are really core. If you can get Blood Rush off and your last card in hand is a Beast Within, you're most likely in a really, really good spot. You won't miss resources and you will swing really hard. The other part of the package is Pulping. This one's a bit more volatile. It doesn't block, which is one thing to note. So it is a card that if it's in hand, all you can really hope to do with it is play it. Pitching is obviously bad value, but it is, for me, a really good arsenal target because you're not getting any value out of it being in hand anyway because it's a no block, but this sitting in arsenal can set up into a guaranteed draw 6 off the top later with like an opt effect and start off your turns with Go Again. What this also does is enable your claws because you're going to have drawn and discarded a card, and if it's 6, this gains Dominate and then most likely Go Again, and that lets you then swing even wider with claws as well. So it's like a baby Blood Rush in that sense, but you do have to get lucky off the top or set something up with opt. But these cards in particular really fuel the explosive game plan that Levia can play towards. So with that said, this is my favorite package that Levia has access to, and this is her Go Again package. Her just very consistent ability to swing around 12 plus every turn. And this is enabled with cards like Art of War. We've got Groveling Ghouls. We've got the yellow Groveling Ghouls as well. We've got the Dread Screamer Reds and the Dread Screamer Blues. So what this package does for Levia is give her those consistent turns where your opponent either has to full block to take no damage, or maybe take a little chip here and there still, or eat just some insane numbers. An amazing turn is something as simple as pitch a blue into Dread Screamer into one of the Groveling Ghouls, and that's going to be 12 or 13 damage off of a 3-card hand, or 2 cards if one of them was an arsenal. So this is my favorite little mini package that Levia has, because the Groveling Ghouls can also slot in super well with Art of Wars, because Art of War is going to banish a card, which will turn off Blood Debt, and then if you have a Groveling Growl in arsenal, or you can guarantee that it's in hand, it's really safe to pick Go Again because the Groveling Growl is only going to cost 1, and then you can swing Groveling Growl into something else or however you want to do it. So Art of Wars is just an enabler for Groveling Growls, so running 6 Groveling Growls has felt very comfortable for me. It is a card that you most likely want to play instead of block with because it's such good value, swinging 6 or 7 for just a 1 cost. So this package, really, really strong in Levia. It's just her consistency. It's also something that you can lead into on the back of a Blood Rush if you get really lucky. Claws into a Dread Screamer, into a Groveling Growl. They're all brute attacks, so they're all going to gain a +2. It feels really good. Last thing to note is that, yes, I do run the blue Dread Screamers, even though they're not 6s. That's because late game, when the math gets really tight for your opponent, this is still an attack of 4, which is a great break point They either have to block with 2 or defense reaction or take a chip damage, which can be really strong late game. Also, it's just another way to play your Groveling Ghouls because they still cost 2, just like the red, so you can still swing 4 with a Dread Screamer into like a 7 Groveling Growl. You've still swung 11. Feels pretty good that turn. So, yep, that's going to be the Go Again package here. Very strong, very consistent. And then the next package that Levia has is just her like core value cards that are always going to find their spotlight at some point in the game. So namely, we've got Command and Conquer to top that list. We've got yellow and red Hungering Slaughter Beasts. We've got Endless Maw and Boneyard Marauders. So all these cards are just going to find a point in the game where they are just really good value, really great to play. Namely, the highlights of this are Boneyard Marauder and Endless Maw. At 1 cost, Boneyard Marauder is an amazing arsenal target because you can slot it in arsenal, and then on a Blood Rush turn, when you pitch a blue and have 2 resources, you can swing Claws, pitch a blue, swing Claws, 1 left over, is your Boneyard Marauder for 8. So this card, very, very good to sit in arsenal because it just is going to come up at some point. Being the resource cost of 1, swinging 6, turning off Blood Debt is very good for your deck. The Endless Maws as well really enable strong 2-card hands where you can block with 2 cards, keep a blue, pitch for Endless Maw, and swing 9, turning off Blood Debt. Very, very strong card there. If this card is something you can end a Blood Rush turn off with, your opponent will be hurting because it goes all the way up to 11. Then it's kind of like the core value cards that aren't amazing, but they just do what the deck wants to do. I'm running the yellow and red Hungering Slaughter Beast. At a 2 cost, they can kind of help with the Frostbite in the meta, where you pitch a blue and you can still swing with these. The red swings for 7, the yellow swings for 6, so they're relevant numbers, but for the most part, these are cards you're very fine just blocking with, or you can even arsenal, because they will be playable at some point. The other reason to play these right now is that with the way I'm playing Levia in this meta, you actually want more Banish 3s in your deck because you want to trim your graveyard for a package that I'm about to show you next. So don't feel afraid to just keep banishing cards out of your graveyard because of this next little package I'm going to show you. And then finally, Command and Conquers are just a great value card in here. If you can do some big Go Again turn, ending on the Command and Conquer, your opponent might not see it, might lose their arsenal, or might lose their whole hand. Command and Conquer, just very strong. It also can get buffed by other cards I'm about to show you, like Howl from Beyond or Convulsions from the Bellows of Hell. And of course, it's a 6 power block 3, so it's just quite good. So that's like the core value attacks in the deck. Now we're going to show you what really has made this deck shine in the current format, I think, and that's the Recursion Engine. So this little package, bar the Doomsday and Soul Harvest, they're just her specializations, but we've got the Ghostly Visits and Howl from Beyonds. And in this format, with decks like Lexi, decks like Briar, Oldhim, really loving the synergies that they can pull off based on cards in hand, Levia can do this with cards in Banished and in Graveyard, which means you can play really loose with your hand and yet still have these value cards that are going to come back that other decks just really can't compete with right now. So the number 1 card that really has been overperforming in this meta, I think, is Howl from Beyond. I wasn't running this in the previous aggro meta because it was only a block 2, and I do side this out quite a bit. But once this is in Graveyard, and you start aggressively banishing cards from your graveyard, you can reach an endpoint state that looks something like this, where you've got 3 cards in your graveyard because you've been aggressively banishing. You play something that banishes 3, they leave. This then goes to your graveyard, and then your next turn, as the game's getting longer, you're drawing more blues, you can play these from Banish, give +3/+3, and then play a new Banish 3, and it's going to have 3 targets, the 2 Howls, and then the 1 thing that you played last turn. And you can just keep going with this loop for quite a bit. It's the other reason to really run Hungering Slaughter Beast in this metagame, because you have an infinite value loop and a way to never miss Blood Debt. So Howl giving +3 on just any attack also works on stuff like Command and Conquer. So really, this card has been overperforming quite a bit. Once you see it in your hand, you just want to get rid of it, get it in graveyard, play it, do whatever you can. And then you can kind of let it sit in Banish until either your hand is just resource heavy and you want to dump it into this, or you hit that point in the graveyard where you do need to start refilling it with cards from Banish. This is a really good value engine, and in versus decks like Oldhim, this can be a way to, over time, eventually close out that game just because the value you're getting by replaying reds over and over. So the other side of that is the Ghostly Visits. These are really good in the more like mid-range tempo matchups, the aggro matchups, because they block 3, and then it's just something cheeky that you can do from Banish, where if this is in graveyard, it gets banished, you can bring it right back in, and it's going to swing 4. It doesn't get buffed by Blood Rush, but this can enable something like a 2-card hand with Dread Screamer. If you pitch a blue, Dread Screamer for 6, play a Ghostly Visit from Banish, well, that feels pretty good. You've just swung 10 off of a 2-card hand. And then, of course, the last cards here are just cards that work around those Blood Debt mechanics. Soul Harvest, great card. Actually has been more relevant in this meta than I would have thought, because I actually am trying to get my graveyard to this recursion state with the Howl from Beyonds. So Soul Harvest is quite playable these days, especially if Prism 6th round as a top dog. This is a very threatening card. Other than that, it's still just a blue 6-power block 3. And then Doomsday. Doomsday, still an amazing card. Blasmafet is really strong right now because he just lets you block even more. Block 3, swing Blasmafet, banish the 1 card in hand, turn off Blood Debt. He's just an imminent value threat that your opponent eventually will have to kill, and then he's bought you 6 life. And in this format, especially with the fact that I'm not running Arcanite Skullcap, the fact that he buys you 6 life is just a very big deal. So yeah, Blasmafet, still absolutely amazing. So then the last little group of cards here, this is just the blue package. It doesn't really have its own identity other than these are just those blue cards that you have to play. And some of them are actually quite good and quite playable at different points of the game. So we've got Wrecker Romp Blues, we've got Deadwood Rumbler Blues, Unworldly Bellow, Convulsions from the Bellows of Hell, and then 2 Reckless Swing and 1 Eye of Ophidia. So really all these cards actually have their point in the game where they're playable. Namely, with Eye of Ophidia, this card's amazing to pitch with Pulping or to pitch with Blood Rush Bellows because of the Opt 2 is going to come in big when you get to look at the top of your deck and see what you draw. The Reckless Swings are amazing to just end the game 1 half-turn cycle early, especially versus those other mid-range decks. With a lot of the aggro being gone in this format, this card loses a little bit of value, but it's still too cheeky to not include. And the fact that, say you're going second, you can play this, get some free chip damage in, and fill the graveyard as well. So it's really just still quite a good card. Then we've got Convulsions and Unworldly Bellows. So these are just other ways to turn off Blood Debt that are not attack actions themselves. And both of those buffs are actually pretty relevant. So when you're hitting this recursion state with the Howl from Beyonds, the more Banish 3s the better. And you can get on some crazy loops late game if you have enough blues, where you just have Howls in the graveyard, banish them with an Unworldly, play them back, banish them again with an Unworldly, play them back onto like even a Ghostly Visit or something can really stack up the damage. So they're quite good. Convulsions as well is just a Dominate +1 ability, which is really relevant the later the game goes, and it can even apply on cards like Command and Conquer. Not like it comes up that much, but if this card ends up being an arsenal for some reason, that is the play I like to go for, is just set up the Convulsions into the Command and Conquer play to kind of reset the game a bit. Then we've got the blue 6s with Deadwood Rumbler and Wrecker Romp. These cards are just great because when they're discarded from Blood Rush, it still triggers. You can banish them with Art of War, still get Blood Debt turned off and all that. They're just really decent cards and actually fine to play early game to just fill the graveyard a bit. If your opponent has a card in Banished and you don't have Blood Debt yet, you can play Deadwood Rumbler. Even if you discard a 6, you're not going to banish a card in your grave, you're going to banish a card in theirs, and that can help fill up the graveyard a bit. Wrecker Romp as well, going early. You can just pitch a card, play Wrecker Romp, discard a card, arsenal whatever the last card was, and start filling your graveyard with some goodies. So that's the blue package. And that's really how the core of this Levia deck is looking. That's 60 cards right there. So I do have sideboard. I do have a sideboard and some suggestions and some thought pieces on what cards I didn't include, what cards I'm still kind of looking for room for, and things like that. But I actually want to put that out in a separate video because it's more theory and less showing you what's worked so far. So with that, guys, I hope you really liked this deck tech. Like I said, Levia has been doing really, really well in this format. And I think she's poised to potentially do pretty well at Nats. I will be taking her, and we'll see how she does. So thanks, guys. Wish me best of luck, and I'll see you in the next video.